Hi, I'm Bill Phillips from Phillips Performance, and I think you all know by now, if you're watching this video, what we're known for is helping you get these Challengers with this kind of meat under the back of it. Cost effectively without drilling or messing with your car, a cost-effective way to turn one of these beasts into something that looks like a beast. Now, the next thing we're going to work on now is how do we get the exhaust coming out of here cheaply and ineffectively to put a little more meat to it, just like we have on the car. To do that, you're going to need one of these kits, which are called the Phillips Performance Active Exhaust Delete Kit, and it's going to look like this, and I'm going to show you how to install it. Below, I'm going to show you everything that it comes with, but this is the kit that we're going to install today. It comes with a nice set of instructions. You'll need an 8mm wrench. You'll need an 8mm ratchet with an extended socket on it. I brought two different types of screwdrivers just in case you want to use either one of these. Both of them should work. You probably won't need the extension, but I always bring one anyhow. These 3 bolts come with the kit. These 2 motor extenders come with the kit. I sell these in both black and in red. These are the base plates and the rotational items. And the theory behind these is that this particular plate right here is going to prop the valve, the active exhaust valve that's stock on your Challengers, open. And this is going to mount onto here, and it's going to allow this to turn and mimic what would happen as if this kit were not on here and the active exhaust delete kit was actually working. It's going to trick it so you throw no codes inside your car. It means no lights on the dash. What we are going to need, we're going to need some high temp grease. So I suggest some high temp or some lithium grease to put on some of the parts that are on this. Follow me and I'll show you where we're going to do that. Okay, see, now that we've retrieved our grease, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to take the base plate and we're going to flip it over. And we're going to take the spring seat rotation unit. We're going to put a little bit of grease on the back of this thing, like this, and pop it right down on there like that. So it's got, now, it's not a necessity that you do this, but it will absolutely lead to the fact that you wouldn't have any noise inside of this. We've run them without it, and with it, we just always do it as a safety mechanism. And it's a good way to do this. And again, it goes on this side, and you leave these face down like this. It's good that you put some lubrication on here to prevent them from making any noise. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the unit that's in the car. And what I suggest is to pop off the existing electronic mount. And you do that by loosening up the clip right here, and it pops off like this. And this disconnects the electricity to this active exhaust delete valve. This is the valve that's inside of here that's activated by this motor that actually closes up when you're at idle. And you'll notice when you start your cars up, it's got a louder noise in the beginning, both because the pipes are cold and because the valve is straight open. And then as it warms up, the valve closes, and it's designed to close up to make less noise at a stoplight when it's sitting in idle. So one of the things you're going to notice with this kit is you get a nice, better sound tone when it's idling at a stoplight or when you're in idle someplace. So the first thing we do is disconnect this clip. The next thing we're going to do is loosen up all of the factory mounting bolts with an 8mm socket. This is the 8mm socket that's in your diagram that's on your instructions. We're going to remove this. I suggest taking the top left one off like this first. I like to do it nice and even. Now be prepared that when this motor comes off of here, it's spring-loaded. And everybody should know that this motor is spring-loaded onto here, so it's going to pop out in your hand a little bit. So you always want to put your hand on the motor when you're loosening it. You'll notice it went down right there. And there's your spring load on the motor. I stepped away from that. I don't recommend it. It can fall off because I've loosened it off there. And you pull it off. And here's the factory spring mount that's in the back of this. This is the active exhaust valve right there, the one that we're after propping open. And here's the spring that holds it open. So you'll notice this motor is designed to turn this spring, which turns this valve right here. And this spring is designed to allow a little bit of play. Now, some of the other kits on the market, I'm not downing anybody else's product, doesn't allow for that forgiveness. It causes the spring to bind up. I've used several of the other products in the market. We think ours is a little superior because it allows the spring to do and this whole action to occur naturally like it would if the valve was actually working. So we're going to repeat this procedure on the next side, but right now I'm going to go ahead and install this one on this side right here. So what I'm looking through is the instructions here to show you guys that I'm going to follow the instructions specifically. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up and we're going to install this unit right here onto this faceplate. And one of the things that we're going to do is you're going to find that it locks directly in. When it goes directly in like that, it's because we've got the valve open. So you open the valve all the way up, which is to the left side. You plant it down in there, and you'll notice it has a nice flat seat in there, and that has to do with it being properly mounted. Because if you don't do this and you leave it open like this, you'll notice that it doesn't go in as well. So you want this thing open. You want the valve in an open position to match these lines here, match these lines here, and you mount it in this direction like this. This is very important that you see this. In fact, I'm going to do it on top of this white box. It comes with 2 little washers on each one. I'm going to leave one of them on here, and you pull each of these washers off, and we're going to put a washer on each one of these extruded, sticking out bolts, the factory bolts that are on here. You notice that I have 6 washers per side, but this side appears that I only have 4. And the reason why, lots of times when these washers are packaged, is they actually stick together. So when you pry them apart like this, you'll discover that there are, in fact, 6 washers here. I'm going to put a washer on each one of these. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the shaft that's here, and we're going to mount the shaft on top of this. Put all 3 of them on. Screw it down by hand. Again, snug them down by hand. And here's where we're going to take our 8mm wrench. And again, you'll need an open-end wrench. And you notice these are squared off. So you take your 8mm open-end wrench and you tighten these down equally. Now, you do not have to torque these down. These are not sensitive to torque. So these, you've got the crush washers that we put on here allow a nice tight seat, and they're serrated so that it'll hold it on there very tight. And one of the reasons that I bought and brought a shorter wrench, because it is a little easier on the top one if you have a shorter wrench. There we go. There's the position right there. Now we mount our plate. You may have to push this fuel vent tube up a little bit, the fuel feed tube into your tank. And you mount this piece that goes on here directly like this. Now the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back and we're going to take the factory motor and we're going to put the factory motor right back on where it came from, directly on here like this. Now we're going to come back with our washers right here. Our crush washers. And then we're going to go right back on with the factory with the factory bolts. Now we're going to put this back on the way we took it off. Again, we take the 8mm wrench and we tighten it down. Again, ever so lightly. There's nothing stiff about this. It's not hard to do. You don't have to apply a lot of pressure to these. In fact, I'd recommend that you don't apply a lot of pressure to these. Get them snug. You notice what I can do with just 3 fingers, just snug it down evenly. Now, we're nearing the end, and one of the more important parts, you'll notice that this now matches the factory look that was on your car with the exception of the motor being extended. We do produce these in black where you'd look under here and you probably wouldn't even see it. And the last step that you need to do is you need to plug this back in. And the important part that I want you to hear is what happens when you plug it back in. That's your motor resetting back into position. If you happen to get the spring or valve out of position, you'll notice that it clicks when it spins like that, and it's now resetting back to the open position, which is what happens every single time that you actually turn your car on, as the motor resets just like that. One of the things that you will not hear on other people's units is the unit actually reset properly. So with that being said, this is the install on one side. Now I'm going to move to the other side. It's done identically to this one. Okay, now remember, we've got the motor deinstalled. It's unhooked. The electrical wire is right here. We're going to make sure that the valve is in open position. We're going to mount this plate down and get a nice flat fit. We're going to install one lock washer on each shaft, each factory shaft. And then after the factory shaft, we put the Phillips Performance Active Exhaust Delete Kit on each individual shaft. I like to put them all on individually with no pressure on the plate yet at all. And then we get it down. You can do 2 of them at one time. You get the nice square position on the plate. Do it all finger tight. And the next thing we're going to engage is the 8mm wrench to get a slightly tightened environment. Again, it's not necessary to torque on these things. They're not needed for heavy torque. Let the washer do the work. Now, you've got your piece in that's going to fake out the motor. You've got your factory shafts installed. Your washer is behind the plate here, which is going to hold it up tight to this. And again, just like the other side, the next step is to install the extension plate. I suggest tilting it up, doing this one first, sliding it on like this. You've got your plate on. And the next step will be the motor. Again, with the spring in place, we're going to place the motor on like this, push it down on tight. Again, the spring doesn't have to be in any particular position. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our washers, again on the outside, our lock washers. And then we're going to go right back in with our factory nuts again. These gloves, to be honest with you, make it a little difficult, but I thought it would be easier for you to see with my hands in the way. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back in for our tightening sequence. And that is very lightly. Tighten each individual one. Light as you can. Make the pressure nice and even. And the last thing, if you all remember, is we're going to go right back. We're going to bring our factory clip up here, our motor clip. Remember, the clip is on the outside like this, and we're going to pop it right back in here like this. And listen for it. Folks, the install's done. Both are set. The next thing you do is put the car down and listen for the good sound. Remember, the sequence that we go through is we remove. There's a washer here. There's an outside washer. 3 factory nuts are used. Last step is to plug the motors back in so that they reset. This concludes our active exhaust delete installation video. You can find these on our website. Thank you so much.